Do you find yourself in conversations about keto or even in social media seeing the same misinformation, the same questions asked over and over again and incorrect answers given? Man, the misinformation and the misapplication of science that doesn't even apply to ketonians drives me nuts. Let's talk about 10 of those myths. Hey team, it's Mike here at After 40 Fitness and after40fitness.ca. Great question came in. It comes up all the time, questions about keto, and I hear misinformation. I hear myths. Hey, listen, do me a favor. If you haven't yet, or if this is your first time to my channel, please do subscribe. Putting out 2 or 3 videos a week right now. Most are of a health, wellness, diet regimen, fitness program style nature. And you'll know by the title if it's of interest to you. But if you are keto or you're considering it or you know someone in conversation who's brought up the keto wave, man, it's mainstream now. Keto's caught on. It's huge. So you may want to give it a go if you haven't already, or you'll know somebody. And this is the kind of video that you really want to share. On that note, 10 myths, 10 misconceptions about keto. We're going to get the ball rolling, and I'm going right for the jugular on the first one. When it comes to artificial sweeteners, well, I shouldn't say that. When it comes to any non-cal sweetener, it could be sugar alcohols or they could be artificial, either one. I'm going to tell you something. There are 2 arguments and only 2 arguments. One, is it keto friendly? Another one, is it health friendly? All right. So there are 2 very distinct arguments. And I find that often in conversations and in social media, those 2 get blurred. So let's talk about them really quickly. First, from a keto-centric perspective. So you know, it doesn't matter if it's aspartame or sucralose, doesn't matter if it's xylitol, erythritol, monk, stevia. From a truly keto perspective, they're all good. They're all good. They're all 0 carb, 0 calorie, okay? Which means that by definition, they're keto friendly. Where the issue comes in is people who like to mix health-centric benefits or health-centric arguments along with keto. See, keto, just so you know, the original definition of keto or in ketosis was to get your body into a metabolic state where you burned fatty acids for fuel and produced ketone bodies, right? That's it. If you look it up, define keto regimen or keto diet, and you'll find that it's a diet, an ultra low carb diet that results in a state called ketosis. Cool. So that's been the standard since 1910 when they first put the first kids with epilepsy on an ultra low carb, high fat diet. And they understood right away that even back then it wasn't healthy. They didn't know what we know now about health ingredients and macros. And so it was not by any means a healthy diet, and it resulted in improvement in those kids and their neurological function, particularly as it applied against epilepsy. Okay, we've since learned more about the impact of seed oils, for example, and other highly manufactured GMO kind of ingredients. And so strict ketonians have taken health-centric arguments and applied it to keto. Well, God bless them. That is entirely your call. If you truly want to eat nothing but whole foods, pasture-raised, grass-fed, grass-finished beef, more power to you. All right. However, it's by no means mandatory. So when it comes to a keto argument, yes, no one can argue they're all going to be keto friendly. From a health-centric, yes, there are some health-centric concerns around the artificial, not so much, right? Not so much sugar alcohols and those that come from a natural source, but definitely when it comes to I'll give you an example, sucralose and aspartame, because they're not naturally derived. Well, actually, sucralose is. It's a sugar molecule, cane sugar, with a chlorine molecule attached for added sweetness. Okay, so but we'll call that process. And so strict ketonians have an issue with the processing. Anyway, I'm not going to argue that, right? If people want to apply a health-centric focus to their keto lifestyle, if you want to do that, God bless you. You're entitled to. But please don't mix the topics. I'm so sick and tired of hearing people say that a Diet Coke or a sugar-free Monster, that's not keto-friendly. Bull. 100% bull. You are 100% out to lunch if you ever say that a Diet Coke or a sugar-free Monster are not keto-friendly. Might not be health-friendly. There might be health overtones and concerns. I personally haven't seen anything compelling about either sucralose or aspartame that convinced me that they're the poison or the toxin that, the propaganda is silly. There are more centenarians today, and there continues to be more centenarians every year that drink Diet Coke, right? And where's the poison? Where's the toxin? But you can believe what you want to believe. On that regard, let's just agree to one thing. Let's agree that sugar-free beverages, even if they're sweetened with sucralose or aspartame, obviously the stevia, the erythritol, the monk, all better. But let's agree they're keto-friendly. And you can decide for you if you want to believe, I won't say fall prey to, but if you want to believe the rhetoric that's okay. That's not fair either, is it? If you want to believe the information that's circulating about aspartame and sucralose and their potential health concerns. Make sense? I will touch on one other topic. Dr. Ekberg is a great example of it. Dr. Barry, another one, Dr. Berg. All three of them are very anti artificial sweeteners.
But absolutely all the sweeteners raise your insulin. They may not raise your blood sugar. Your insulin's a whole nother thing, and all the sweeteners raise that.
Oh, Dr. Barry, the audacity. It's so untrue. And this is what I'm talking about. That's completely false information. Not all sweeteners, in fact, no sweeteners have ever been shown in any clinical study ever to raise insulin in ketonians. So what Dr. Barry will do is he'll look at a study that was done on followers of a SAD, right? Followers of a standard American diet. It'll take a group of people who are obese, with a metabolic issue, a condition of some kind, and heavy insulin resistance. And it'll show, for example, he uses one study, he likes to use this one study on sucralose, and roughly 40% of the participants had an insulin response to sucralose. 40% in the most metabolically compromised group on the planet, followers of a SAD diet. Now, one study, however, so here's what I do. As I text Dr. Berg, I text Dr. Barry, and I say, hey, this claim you make of sugar, alcohols, and or artificial sweeteners being insulinic, based on what? What study on ketonians and low-carb people are you basing that information on? And guess what? Invariably, silence. No response, because you know why? Because you and I can do a search for scholarly articles in Google as well as anybody can, and they don't exist. None. Zero. Ever. Right? Seems like even doctors, for some reason, can't differentiate two topics. They can't seem to tease apart health-conscious or health-centric concerns from keto-conscious concerns. Right? So I'm hoping that if this video ever comes across their plate, that they're going to sit back and go, he makes a good point. At least he makes a point that there are two separate concerns, and there are many of us in keto who drink a Diet Coke or sugar-free Monster a day, lose all of our weight, get rid of our inflammation, get fit, get healthy, and the best shape of our lives, and the best health. All the indications, the physiological markers, we're dropping medications, we're improving our inflammation, our joints don't hurt, and yet people are going to say you're unhealthy. Bullshit. So I think we beat number one to death. Let's move on to number two. Number two is that calories don't matter. Make no mistake, calories always matter. However, we have a much simpler way in keto, and that's looking at macros. Looking at macros, because it is intrinsically connected to calories, they're based on each other. A macro is based on calories, and calories can be used to determine macros. If you just use macros and you focus on, let's say, 100 grams a day of protein, 75 grams a day of fat, and 20 grams a day of carbohydrates, make no mistake, you're counting calories. Just a simpler way. Here, let me throw up this image. You've probably seen this before. That there are 4 calories for each gram of carbs and protein, but 9 for fats. So if you know at the end of the day you have to have no more than 20 grams of carbs in a day, guess what? Without even meaning to, with just focusing on 20 grams, you have stayed under 80 calories from carbs for the day. Simple, easy peasy. As far as calories in, calories out, there's no arguing that. You must be in a caloric deficit. What's missing from that CICO argument is the state of the body, the metabolic state. It's not a simple structure, our body, very, very complex. And so while we can control the food that goes in via whatever we put in our mouth, how our body deals with it, that is based on so many variables. Oh my God, it's such a complex machine, right? And so people can react differently to the exact same caloric intake, right? Because of hormonal use, energy wasting that is prone, or that's a feature and benefit of the keto diet. We get to urinate out or even breathe out energy in the form of ketones. How cool is that? Okay, a follower of a SAD diet doesn't get to do that. Right? That's in our favor. But hormones, the big ones, of course, being testosterone and progesterone and estrogen, of course, leptin and ghrelin, oh my goodness, insulin and glucagon. All these play a role in how our body deals with those calories we ingest. Meaning, calories in, calories out is still a viable argument, but how much impact those hormones have on the calories out part, that is individual for each and every person. So, yes, there's some guidelines that can be taken from the calories matter argument, but not too much. Number 3, too much protein. Too much protein will kick you out of ketosis. Too much protein will inspire gluconeogenesis to produce too much blood sugar. I mean, it's too much protein. Protein is insulinic. There's every argument you can make against protein is out there. None of them are true. Now, I will say this. There is some science, again, looking at followers of a SAD, followers of a standard American diet, that does show that in excess, protein will spike gluconeogenesis in followers of a SAD, never in ketonians. Again, how the science got, just brought over and extrapolated to automatically seem to want to apply to ketonians, again, drives me nuts. Because every time someone runs a study on those in ketosis and gives them excess protein, guess what happens? Not a damn thing. Nothing. So this is where at least my buddy Thomas has come around. For the last couple of years, I've been chasing Thomas DeLauer, putting comments in posts going based on what science? Where do you get this information? Let me give you a couple examples of what I mean.
Now, I have to fall on the sword here a little bit. A couple of years ago, I used to believe that too much protein would kick you out of keto. But the fact is, when we start looking at the science, and now there's a lot more science surrounding the keto world, we find that gluconeogenesis is a perfectly healthy process that doesn't necessarily kick you out of keto. So what I mean by that is, when you consume protein, it's not converting to sugar that's knocking you out of ketosis. It's converting into sugar that your body needs for specific demands.
In the interest of time, I won't give you more than that example. But anyway, it's good on Thomas to come around. I mean, it took him a couple of years, and he was using science at the time based on SAD, but he has seen the light, and so God bless him. I mean, I love that. I love that a guy's willing to check his ego and change his mind on a topic. Now, maybe Barry and Berg will do the same on all the topics where they make claims without science. Yes, amino acids can be converted into glucose, and they are, but only to maintain that homeostatic level of fasting glucose that you and I need, not above it. If you're like me and you have a fasting glucose right around the 70 milligram per deciliter mark, guess how much gluconeogenesis is going to produce for you? Up to 70. Not to 90, not to 110, not to 140. That's enough to get you out of ketosis. Never happens. In fact, I did a video, I'll put the link below, where for fun, I ingested 60 grams of protein in a hurry. 30 grams of whey isolate, 30 grams of whey concentrate, and then tested my ketones and glucose every 15 minutes for 2 hours to see what the impact would be of 60 grams. Now, some of you are afraid of 60 grams in the course of a day. I drank 60 grams of whey in about 2 minutes and did not leave ketosis. I did not have this insulinic response that drove my ketones and my glucose down to hypoglycemic levels. Zero. I'll put the link. You can try it yourself. You actually should. Every one of you who thinks that protein does whatever, you should do a test on yourself. Drink some whey. Apparently, according to Berg, the most insulinic protein source on the planet is whey isolate. And you'll watch. Your ketones will not drop. Your blood glucose won't drop. This is a video in and of itself. Right? Saturated fat, all I'm going to go on record is saying that there is absolutely no reason to think that keto is high saturated fat. The fact of the matter is it's not as high in saturated fat as carnivore is. We have way more options as far as our protein sources and our fat sources. And so while carnivores tend not to be able to have items like MCT oil, right, coconut oil or olive oil, having said that, if you're like me, I do love my ribeyes. I love steaks all the time. Right? So I do eat a lot of red meat. And yet that's where the research is showing that it's no longer the concern that people make it out to be, that there is no issue with saturated fats minus carbs. I will put a link below to a lecture on cholesterol and the impact it has on arteries. And it's really remarkable how it's more of a Band-Aid than anything else. You'd be amazed. When carbs, or sugar for that matter, scar the walls of our arteries, that's when cholesterol goes in like macrophages, creates a patch. And those patches build up over time until it causes the plaque that we fear. And so what I just want to paint the picture of, spend some time doing some research on this, because the research of late is just phenomenal, that there really is no need to fear. In the absence of carbs and sugar, there's no reason to fear saturated fat. Those links from saturated fat to high cholesterol and high LDL, and therefore those links from there, those causal relationships that they've tried to establish to that in heart disease, that all exists. That science is solid. But again, just like I've mentioned now a couple of times, it pertains to those who follow a SAD. That when you look at, and I'm by no means a scientist, I just love to read this stuff. This stuff truly intrigues me. And it seems to be that in the absence of carbs, that none of that seems to be the case. That people who have much more saturated fat than they used to have when they were on a SAD diet can now have far more saturated fat and cholesterol in their diet today, but minus the carbs, their CAC scores or CACs and the other biomarkers of an indication of cholesterol and LDL improve. Number 5, carbs are essential. Man, if you've been in keto for a while, you've heard that. How can you give up carbs? You can't give up carbs. Carbs are mandatory. You need carbs to live. So funny. It's so funny because that is how it has been sold now for the last couple of 3-4 decades. And yet Just so you know, carbs, ingesting carbs, completely inconsequential. Here's what you need to know. There are a couple of known parts of the body that need carbs to run. One is erythrocytes, which is red blood cells. Another one is hypothesized as part of the brain. It's assumed that part of the brain, and even that's being questioned now, that part of the brain needs carbs. The testicles in a man need carbs, as do kidneys. There are kidney cells that don't have the ability to oxidize fats, therefore they need carbs. But guess what we already talked about that is so cool about the human body? It can make carbs. Whether it's through the various processes, the most common one being gluconeogenesis, the body has the ability to convert triglycerides as well as lactic acid, lactate, and the most common one is amino acids can all be converted via various cycles into carbohydrates the body needs. So the body has this ability to provide just what's needed. Now, I'm going to show you a study here. This is a remarkable study that I stole from Dr. Ben Bickman. And he showed what happened to a group of people where they gave them 2 months of keto to make sure they were what we call fat adapted. So after 2 months, these people are hypoglycemic. But after 2 months of being in the keto space, they were given enough insulin to drive their fasting glucose levels, their homeostatic glucose levels, down to 0.5 millimole. 0.5 millimole. Just so you know, it's considered hypoglycemia or hypoglycemic for individuals to drop below 3 millimole. Well, they had insulin drive them down to 0.5. Notice this information. It's so cool. And despite that, completely asymptomatic. So the fact that we can maintain minimal amounts of glucose, that my fasting glucose level is 70 milligram per deciliter, tells me that the body, for some reason, has this homeostatic level that is, well, obviously by a factor of like somewhere between 7 and 10 times more than the body actually needs. Well, there you have it. That's 5 already out of the 10. And we're at 16 minutes. So I tell you what we'll do. Let's consider this keto myths number 1. Keto myths number 2 will come out in a couple of days. So I hope you enjoyed that. You had fun at my expense on a couple of those items, but hopefully you agree and or will do some research to try to prove me wrong. And I welcome it. I welcome those comments. By all means, throw some in with some research you'd like me to consider, to look into, to dig deep and rip apart. And I'll be happy to take those very comments and turn it into a follow-up video just like this one. On that note, thanks so much for spending your time with me. Again, I'll see you in part 2 shortly. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And certainly share this with anybody you know who's keto-ish or thinking about keto or a keto aficionado. I know they'll appreciate some of those comments, whether contentious or not. On that note, see you in the next one.